because once you pulled that one good ball out of the urn, there ain't more than that. Things that can't happen. Now, we don't have to go through the probability of good, bad, bad, good, bad, bad, right? Because those are all, that's all, the probability of bad, bad, if your medium is the same. And then the probability, so these numbers would be the same for the probability of seeing bad, bad, given that your medium, both for the correct version and for the Freddy version. And also, in this super simplified example, the probability of seeing good, bad, given that your medium, is the same whether you're Freddy or not. Is that right? That actually isn't right. But it doesn't matter because it doesn't show up in my example, so forget about it. But I don't need to do, oh, no, I'm sorry. The probability that you would see good, good, given that you have high skill, and the probability of seeing good, good, given that you're low skill, is the same for both the correct version and the Freddy version in this example, right? Because the probability of seeing good, good if you're high skill is 1. Because in this stupid example, the high skill always beats the market. And the probability, and Freddy agrees. Freddy knows this. So this is the only mistake that Freddy's making in terms of the gambler's fallacy is he fails to correctly compute the probability of seeing 2 goods in a row given that a person is of medium skill. Okay? So now let's think about applying Bayes' rule. The correct way to do this, right, is to say the probability that someone is of medium skill, given that you observed 2 quarters worth of beating the market, is equal to 0.5. That's the probability that the underlying probability, the base rate, right, the underlying probability that they're medium skill, times the probability that a medium skilled manager would have beaten the market 2 times in a row, divided by that same thing, plus, right, the joint probability for a high skilled person. There's a quarter of them, and they beat the market all the time. And then what about the joint probability for an unskilled person? There's a quarter of managers with them, but they never beat the market. Okay, so here's joint probability for medium, joint probability for high skill, joint probability for low skill. Okay, and that's equal to it's equal to 1/3. And the probability that you're a high skill, given that you've observed 2. So given the probability that Helga is high skill, given that I observe, or that Freddy observes, no, not Freddy, that a normal ordinary person observes 2 quarters of beating market, is equal to where am I here? 0.25 times 1, right? So that's the base rate for high skill times the conditional probability that they would beat the market 2 quarters in a row, divided by the same thing, this same denominator. And that's equal to 2/3. And so if you see someone having a good streak, it turns out that, yeah, they are more likely to be high skilled than low skilled, but fully a third of the time, they'll be mediocre. And if we adjusted the probabilities and made it so that the unskilled manager sometimes beats the market, a share of people with really good streaks would, in fact, a small share would, in fact, be unskilled managers. What does Freddy think? Okay, Freddy is going to apply Bayes' rule. What part of Bayes' rule is he going to get wrong? Last time we saw him getting the base rates wrong. This time, he's going to get these joint probabilities wrong. Okay, so he's going to get that's a joint probability. He's going to get that wrong. He's going to get that wrong. He's actually, in this case, he's not going to get these ones wrong, but in a lot of situations, he will get all of these base rates wrong. I'm sorry, all of these joint probabilities wrong. Okay, it wasn't quite right. These aren't joint probabilities. So that's a joint probability, and the part of it he's going to get wrong is the computation of this conditional probability of seeing the signal given a particular type. So it's these numbers over and over again that he's going to get wrong. So he thinks the probability that your medium quality, given that we've observed good, good, is equal to 0.5, the base rate of medians, times his idea of the conditional probability of seeing 2 quarters of good returns given that you're mediocre, which is 0, right? Divided by stuff, which we can ignore. Right? It's going to be, you need to be able to, you need to know how to compute this stuff, but in this case, it's just to save time. It doesn't matter what the stuff is unless the stuff is 0, which it isn't. So he thinks that the probability that the person is medium given 2 quarters of good returns is 0, and he thinks the probability of high given 2 quarters of good, good is equal to, so what, he gets this right? 0.25 times 1, that's the joint probability that a good manager, that you would see a good manager and 2 quarters worth of, if you randomly selected a fun manager, that you would pick a good one who had 2 good quarters. And then the stuff that I ignored here with this wiggle is that same joint probability for good managers, high, plus his idea of the joint probability for medium managers, which is 0.5 times 0, plus his idea of the joint probability for bad managers, which is 0.25 times 0. Okay? So there's his idea of the joint probability for medium quality managers, and there's his idea for low managers. And because these things are both 0, that's 1. Okay. All right? This is what he should have inferred. The probability that Helga is high skilled is 2/3. This is what he actually inferred. The probability that Helga is high skilled is 1. And so we call this over inference. Okay? All right. End of agonizing and very simple math. Yeah. So what if you give Freddy 3 signals? If we give Freddy 3 signals, and we're keeping n equal to 2, he's going to be in a pickle, right? Or do you want to let n be maybe a little bit bigger? Well, so we would have to decide if we wanted to take this exact model with n equals 2, and then give him 3 quarters worth of data. If there were 3 quarters right in a row, we'd have to sort of arbitrarily say that the urn is refilled every 2 quarters. But if it's really 3 quarters right in a row, this is where I was saying this replacing the balls periodically is kind of unsatisfactory part of the model. Because what we really think is that if you see a short run of data all close together, right, a series of signals close in space, that you're not replacing the balls, which means that n must not be 2. And so we can't sort of set n exactly where we want, both because it has to be a multiple of 1 over p, but also because, and then if we said, well, what if we give him 2 quarters of data and then wait a few years and give him another quarter's worth of data? Is it then right to say, well, he must have replaced those balls in the urn in the intervening years? And then what if we say something slightly different, which is we give him 3 quarters worth of data all at once, and 2 of them are from a few years ago, and 1 of them is from the last quarter? Then do we say, well, he would have replaced the balls in between, or do we say, no, he must have an n equal to 4, and he just treats that as 1 run of data? And this model is silent on those details. Right? So it's somewhat unsatisfactory in that way. Yeah. So the question, tell me your name. James. So James's question is, if a person has base rate neglect, and that causes them to inflate the probabilities, like the poor Transportation Security Administration officer in your problem set, do we also call that overinference, and what's the difference? And the answer is that you certainly could call that overinference. And in terms of when would you use one model versus another, I don't actually feel like I understand the full range of different settings in which you would need to model overinference well enough to have a good answer to that. One of the things that I think is a little bit, this is true in all of economics, standard and behavioral, and for all aspects of behavioral economics. There are situations where the same observed behavior can be explained by a variety of different models. And then we have to think very hard to come up with clever experimental tests to say, well, this situation can be explained by these two competing models, but if we tweak that situation a little bit, then the two models predict different things, so then we can run that experiment and say which is the right model. But here, the reason this is, so that's great if you're trying to decide whether you want beta or whether you want beta delta or just delta, right? But this is a situation where we have scads of different models, and we think that they may actually all be correct in different kinds of situations. And so what you're asking is, what if someone has base rate, or a question similar to what you're asking would be, what if someone has base rate neglect and belief in the law of small numbers? Which of those two things is driving any particular case of overinference? And since we think that these are both valid models but in different situations, it's not as simple as which is the correct, which of these models is valid. They're both valid. We just don't know which one's in effect right now, and they could both be driving the result. And most of the time, we're just going to say, it doesn't matter. We got our intuition out of this. We understand something about overinference. Let's move on. But there's going to be times when, no, we actually need to know mathematically which model to plug in. If you're working for the Federal Reserve Board, for example, and you're trying to decide whether or not to raise interest rates, and somebody, let's say Cass Sunstein, for example, or Dick Thaler, has convinced you to include behavioral economic modeling in your big, massive 4-dimensional model of the American economy, then by God, you're going to need to know which model to use. And we're not there yet. Okay, so let's look at some consequences, and this goes back to sort of an offhand comment I made to Palace a few minutes ago, that even with this extremely dumbed-down example, we can actually we can pull out a fair bit of intuition, of economic intuition about where this might matter, how it might matter. Okay, the first one is pretty obvious. Freddie will overinvest with mediocre managers, right? The overinfers, he thinks that there's a whole bunch of mediocre managers here that he thinks are high-skilled. Okay, and I have here, if he gathered more data, he would invest more wisely. The model is a little bit awkward as to exactly how we would model that, but one thought is, if he had more data, he'd be forced to increase n. He'd be forced to think more broadly about, well, this is a larger sample. I have to be a little bit more intelligent about the underlying distribution here. But also, if you gave Freddie n of 10 and gave him 2, I believe this is a correct statement. If you hold n constant at something like 10 and give him 2 quarters worth of data, he's going to overinfer more than if you give him 3 quarters worth of data. Okay? So even with n held constant, his level of Freddiness, giving him more data is still going to get him closer. I believe this is correct, get him closer to what Bias001 would suggest. Please don't quote me on that. And then this is sort of what I was saying, under relaxed assumptions about ability. So if we allowed a really low-skilled manager to occasionally just, right, so there's this idea that, if you just put 100 monkeys in front of typewriters, eventually one of them will come up with a Shakespeare sonnet, which is not a comment about monkeys, it's a comment about human beings. So the idea is that, if a mediocre manager just sometimes picks right by random chance, then he will, in fact, overinfer that really, really low-skilled, dumb managers are, in fact, highly skilled. Okay. Then he may switch funds too often. Right? So let's say that he invests with a pretty good manager who nonetheless blows it from time to time. Okay? So if he sees bad after a streak of good, okay, he may infer that Helga's ability has changed. So this is like a basketball player going from a hot streak to a cold streak just because random data is lumpy. Okay? And so, yeah, Alex. So bad might mean not beating the market by much.
And then what was you saying? Bad after good. In our models, there must be because mediocre is the only word that we're associating nowadays.
Yeah, so if he saw a string of goods, he thinks, oh, this person's, let's say he sees 3 goods in a row. The first 2, he's drawing balls out of an urn that has only good balls in it. And then he puts the balls back in, right? And we get a third round, he pulls out a good. And he thinks to himself, well, if I see one more good, then this must be a good manager again. But if he pulls out a bad on that fourth turn, then he thinks, oh, I must have been wrong. Yeah, so sorry, it's not that he thinks he was wrong. It's that, oh, Helga just went from being a good manager to being a crappy manager. Right. Right? So that's the well, the basketball is making a lot of shots. It must be a day when he or she is performing particularly well relative to their normal average. Like that their actual ability, they ate their Wheaties that day, right? And on a day when they're having, just by random chance, a cold streak, it must be because there was something else in their Wheaties, maybe, right? So he might switch funds instead of writing out an unlucky streak. And if he's got if he's investing in no-load funds, this is costless. But if he's paying a fee every time he switches, this could potentially cause him considerable harm. And you could argue that that is a problem that day traders often face. Okay. Freddie will overestimate the variation in skill among managers, right? So that's pretty obvious. Suppose that in fact all managers are mediocre. Okay, that there are none that always beat the market and none that never beat the market, and in fact they all are basically just picking randomly and beating the market half the time. Or maybe that's not random, but they're beating the market half the time. So the actual distribution of good, good, bad, bad, and good, bad, bad, good, right, will be a quarter of the time you'll see good, good streaks, a quarter of the time you'll see bad, bad streaks, and half the time you'll see these mixed streaks. Okay, all from a completely undifferentiated pool of mediocre managers, 100 monkeys sitting in front of the New York Stock Exchange. Freddie will instead infer that there must be the same matching distribution, right? His urn is empty, so the observed distribution must be identical to the underlying distribution, so he thinks that there's this wide distribution, which means that he may be excessively susceptible to persuasion. Now, I've kept this painful truth from you until now. In fact, empirically, all mutual fund managers are mediocre, because in fact, empirically, you cannot systematically beat the market, because the market, to a first order approximation, is a random walk, right? Future returns are not predicted, cannot be predicted on past performance. In fact, but if people are somewhat Freddy in their probabilistic inference, then they will go around susceptible to persuasion that in fact a bunch of people who just randomly beaten the market 2 quarters in a row did so because they were highly skilled. Okay? And just so you know, overwhelmingly, unless your goal is to lose money, you should just put your money in an index fund. I think that's right. I've never, ever, ever met a professional financial manager who said anything other than that. Okay. Finally, I'll just be real brief about this. Freddie will underestimate and misunderstand reversion toward the mean. Right? So these are kind of overlapping insights. They're all kind of getting at roughly the same thing. So here's just so you know what we mean by reversion toward the mean, and probably you've learned this. in general, after an extreme value from any random process, you're more likely to see a value closer to the mean, right? A less extreme value. So, for example, and this is one of the places where this was first observed, the children of tall people are usually shorter than their parents, okay? But on average, all people are usually shorter than tall parents. So to the extent that your height is partly random, right? If your parents are exceptionally tall, your height is going to revert to the mean, because your height is basically randomly selected from the same process that their height was randomly selected from. Everybody is more likely to be shorter than your tall parents, including you. And so we have not observed anything about the relationship between parents' height and children's height. We've just observed reversion to the mean. So in general, after a very good quarter, Helga's performance is likely to be closer to the mean, because in general, Helga's performance is likely to be closer to the mean after any, in general, Helga's performance is likely to be relatively closer to the mean after any other quarter, right? It's not because doing really well is pushing her down to the mean. It's just because in general, most quarters are closer to the mean. Okay? So there's this lovely piece of sports economics called the Sports Illustrated cover jinx. It's been observed for decades over and over again that when an athlete appears on the cover of Sports Illustrated, they tend to then do very badly. And the idea is that being on Sports Illustrated jinxes you, and then you're uptight and you choke. Okay? And probably what's actually going on here is that the reason you got on the cover is because you were doing really well. And after any period of doing really well, by reversion to the mean, you're more likely to do closer to your mean, because on any randomly drawn day, you're likely to do fairly close to the mean. All right, so that's just some various insights about what the law of small numbers can do in situations, some of which are sort of not very important and just kind of fun, and others of which have huge economic significance. Okay, let's go back to here. Any final comments about the law of small numbers before we move on? All right. So now we're going to talk about overconfidence and underconfidence, and I see that I didn't animate my slides, so that's unfortunate, because there are lots of cute little surprises, but since you've got them in front of you, those cute surprises are presumably never that surprising. This is the classic. Svensson, 1981, not the first person to observe this, but this is a classic. Ask college students to rank their driving ability relative to other subjects. Right? And so there's this lovely, the stylized fact that people love to quote, which is not actually exactly what's observed, is that 90% of American drivers believe they're in the top 10% of driving ability. And the truth is not quite as damning as that, but it's still pretty damning, which is that among, at least in Svensson's sample of American college students in 1971, and maybe people have wised up since then, that in the U.S., when he asked them to rank themselves on skill relative to the other people in the sample that they were in, sitting in the same room, looking around, these are other college students, 92.7% of them said that they were above median. Okay? And then, because you might think, well, that's because they all have different ideas of what skill means, and they're all doing really well on the thing they care about. So then he asked them a specific dimension of skill, which is safety, which is actually observable, and still almost 90% of them think that they are in the top half of safeness. It's a little bit less damning in Sweden, and what's really, I'll tell you what is really interesting, if you, this is not all, I'm going to buzz through a bunch of articles, they're all in these space, is a really significant number of American students said that they were in the top 10%. Virtually no Swedish students said they were in the top 10%. So they all were overconfident, but in a slightly more modest way. So I don't know if that's just the psychological effect of long dark winters, or I don't know what that is. Now, just to really drive the point home, and I have to say I really love this. This was actually an earlier study, 1965. Preston and Harris asked two different groups of drivers to rank themselves on a scale from very poor to expert. So basically the same kind of question. Two groups of drivers, 50 drivers with no serious accidents on their driving record, 50 drivers with an accident serious enough to put them in the hospital. And they were asked to rank themselves while they were in the hospital. Okay? All right? So of that second group, and then they matched them. They matched the first group A were matched to group B on all of the different observable, age and gender and so forth. Everything except their driving record. Of this 50 who were in the hospital, 34 had been responsible for the accident, and 22 of them had actually faced criminal charges on the basis of the accident. And I say criminal, I think they're mostly probably not. They're infractions, right? They're reckless driving. And I don't know, sometimes that's a criminal charge, and sometimes it's just a ticket. The only time I've ever been booked for reckless driving was just an infraction. What is the point? The point is that all drivers in both groups placed themselves closer to expert and very poor, and there was no statistically difference in the rankings between the two groups. Right, so even having just caused an accident through criminal negligence and being in the hospital as a result does not correct the problem, weirdly enough. Okay. Here's a somewhat more, potentially economically more relevant domain, which is chief executive officers of publicly traded companies deciding whether or not to go on a merger binge and acquire another firm, okay, through a stock buyout. So Hayward and Hambrick back in 1997 did the following. They got a bunch of data on acquisitions, on mergers, and they tracked down the CEOs, and they got all kinds of information about the CEOs of the acquiring firm, the firm that went and did this buyout. And they created an index of what they're calling hubris, which we think is sort of similar to the overconfidence, right? Hubris, arrogance. You all know the story of Icarus flying too close to the sun. And, yeah. So what did they put into their index? These three things. The recent success of the acquiring firm, right, which maybe the CEO interprets as their quality as a manager, based on past year's stock returns. Media praise of the CEO. So they went and searched a bunch of different sort of leading news and general interest newspapers and magazines, and they found and they rated positive and negative comments about the CEOs, and they came up with an index of sort of the net positiveness of the commentary. The net praise, I'm calling it. And then self-importance, which they have a very loose proxy for, which is the ratio of the CEO's pay to the pay of the next highest employee. So to the extent that CEOs have some control over pay, if they're very self-important, they may have hugely inflated salary. So you can quibble with whether or not these are legitimate indicators of hubris or not, but they put them together using factor analysis into a single dimension, which they call hubris index, which they designed